The easiest way to know if a monstera needs to be repotted is to simply take it out of the pot and look at the roots, but I know sometimes this can be difficult if you have a fairly large or mature plant. It's not so easy picking up a giant pot, but there's definitely signs that the plant will give you to help you better decide whether it needs to be repotted or not, so let's check it out. I will also talk about selecting a pot as well, but the first thing that most people will say is that they see roots growing out the bottom. Now this can be a sign of it being root bound, but sometimes you get one little root that just finds its way through the soil down to the drain hole. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is root bound or it needs to be repotted, but in combination with roots growing out the top of the soil, like this one right here, as well as roots growing out the bottom, this is a pretty good sign that the plant probably needs to be repotted and it's fairly root bound. If you find that your plant is drying out faster than it normally would, like if it's drying out in a couple days, then it's probably got a large enough root system that's just soaking up that moisture. Now I like to use just a bamboo skewer, so I'm just using this peace lily here as an example. I've had this skewer in here for a while. This has recently been watered, but when you have a bamboo skewer like this, you place it in the soil, let it sit there for a couple minutes. If you see any moisture or dirt on the stick like this here, you can see the moisture line right there, and there's some soil on the bamboo skewer. This means that the soil is damp or moist and it does not need to be watered. If you place it in the pot and there's no moisture on the stick or no soil sticking to it, there's a little bit at the bottom here, then this is fairly dry. Monsteras are climbing plants like other aroids, such as the Cebu blue pothos. Here's my one that's growing on a moss pole. When you see signs of lower leaves turning yellow and even falling off, you can see down here, they're not looking the greatest. This can be a sign of it being root bound. So basically what the plant is doing is it's trying to conserve all the newest leaves at the top, and it's going to get rid of the lower leaves. So you can see here, it has actually lost a couple of the lower leaves. Specifically this week, I had a few that basically just fell off and it was absolutely bone dry. And I just want to show it's in a small pot. I'm just going to tip it upside down here. But look at the roots coming out the bottom. So this will definitely need a larger pot at some time as well, but it has the benefit of being on a moss pole, so the moss is an extension of the growing medium. But if you're seeing signs of the lower leaves turning yellow and falling off, then it's probably a good time to look at the roots as well. You want to make sure that you select the right type as well as size of pot, but more importantly, you want to make sure that you have the appropriate soil. I use, this is the VeryPlants aeroid mix. It's just a nice, chunky, airy mixture. It's very fast draining. If you have just a regular potting soil, those are typically a little bit too heavy. It runs the risk of suffocating the roots and eventually developing root rot. You want to make sure that it's in a very well draining mix. You can definitely make your own soil mixture. I just like the convenience of having all the ingredients in one bag and not having multiple bags. Okay, now for pots, you have a decision between terracotta and plastic. If you are an underwaterer, then plastic is probably a good choice for you. It just holds moisture a little bit longer than terracotta. If you are an overwaterer, then terracotta is probably a good choice for you because it's quite porous. Basically, it absorbs soil moisture and helps it dry out quicker. So you can use either. One is not better than the other. It basically depends on your soil type as well as your watering habits. Now, the thing that I like specifically about these plastic nursery pots is you can see root growth, but as well as soil moisture. You can typically see it through the pot here. So that's what I like. If I'm not using terracotta, then I'm using a clear plastic pot. I generally don't use the plastic nursery pots like the original ones that it came in. These are usually the two that I decide to use. Now for the pot size, when selecting an appropriate pot, as a general rule, you want to go one size larger than the pot it's currently in. So I think this is a 4-inch pot. I can't find my measuring tape. And these are, I believe, 6-inch pots. So this would be the next size up. Now I brought this one here just to kind of show what not to do. Now, sometimes people will say, you know, I gave it a larger pot in hopes that it will grow faster or it'll grow larger. In time, obviously it'll grow larger and that sort of thing, but when you place it in a pot, from a small pot to a large pot like this, there's just too much volume of soil, and that just runs the risk of root rot, just for the fact that the soil stays wet for longer than it should. It doesn't dry out fast enough. So selecting an appropriate size pot, something like this, is probably better long-term than just jamming it in a giant pot, hoping it'll grow larger or thinking it'll grow larger. So now I'm going to take it out of the pot. I'm going to try and keep the root and soil intact. So I'm just going to use kind of the butt end of a spoon here. I actually haven't taken this out of the pot, so I really don't know what the roots look like. So I'm just kind of going around the edge of the pot here, just loosening it up, because sometimes the roots can adhere to the side of the pot. So, okay. So definitely we have some encircling roots at the bottom. All the soil is falling off. There's a little bit of soil on top here that is just kind of falling away. So it's not like completely root bound, but definitely it's time for a larger pot. So I'm just going to take the terracotta, the next size up, just to show you. This is the perfect size pot. I don't know if you can see it or not. I used some plant Velcro just to secure it to the plank, and now when I place it in the pot, you can see there's about an inch gap kind of all around the sides, as well as maybe about an inch in the bottom here. So this is the correct size, or the next size, for this plant. And I'll just quickly show, when placing it in the excessively large pot, look how much excess space there is in there. You'll need like a ton of soil just to fill in for this plant. And yeah, that's just way too large of a pot. You're going to have so much excess soil moisture, it's going to stay wet for too long. This little root system is not going to be able to take up the damp soil or wet soil fast enough. So you're gonna get root rot if you place it in a pot like this, especially if you're a heavy waterer as well. I'm gonna be repotting my larger one after this one as well. I'm just gonna put all this soil back in the pot. I'm just gonna dump it in like that, just so I'm not wasting anything. I'm going to kind of pack that down a little bit. I'm going to keep the pot or the plant at the same level as it was before, so it has a little bit of a base layer at the bottom. Now I'm just going to add in soil kind of around the sides. Now whenever I have a support stake like this plank or a moss pole, I will always like to have it angled slightly to the back, as opposed to having it straight up, like up vertical. The reason for that is over time, as the plant grows, it gets heavier. The heavier it gets, it's going to want to pull this forward. So I like to angle it back slightly and then just fill in the gaps with soil. Make sure that you have your plant pencil on standby. That way you can poke down the soil around the roots, filling in any gaps. I know a lot of people use chopsticks and stuff, but pencil is my preference. And then I'm going to pull this forward a little bit and then just dump in the soil and just pack that down. So something like that. So that's probably a good enough angle, and then just fill in the rest. Just make sure it's still center on the plank and the plank is straight as well. Now I'm going to give this one some water just because it was pretty dry before I repotted this. It was drying out really fast. Now some people say not to repot immediately after putting it in new soil or a larger pot, just because sometimes damaged roots, they need a chance to heal, but I'm going to give this one some water. So it's kind of at your discretion whether you water or not after repotting. As a general rule, I will always say water it after repotting if it needed to be watered before you repotted it. So if it needed water, then give it water after you repot it. So it doesn't have to be complicated. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Nice and packed. I generally don't untangle roots. The plant it'll figure itself out there. So I don't like to disturb the roots unless it's like super root bound. Then I'll try and untangle it a little bit, but I've never had any issue with plants struggling over time. So there, it's filled up. Everything looks good. Now I'm going to grab the larger one and we'll take that one out of the pot and see how it looks. So here's my larger monstera. This one's going to be a little bit more difficult just because of the size, and I don't want to break any branches, but here's the pot that it's in. I believe this is either an 8-inch or 10-inch pot. I believe it's an 8-inch, but you can see it's just kind of a big noodle mess right now. Anytime an aerial root grows from the stem, a lot of times people will let them kind of dangle off to the side. I like to redirect them back into the pot. I don't know if there's, yeah, this one, it looks like it's grown into the pot and then it's grown out of the soil and kind of around to the back here and back into the soil. The reason why I redirect roots back into the soil is when they're out of the soil, they're simply for like anchoring or support. Sometimes they'll get like ambient moisture and nutrients and that kind of thing when they're growing naturally. But when I have them growing in a pot, I place them back in the soil. They will change or transition from an anchoring root to a soil root. So when it comes time to propagate, I can cut the stem, say like right here, take that top cutting. It'll have an established root system, and all I have to do is place it in a separate pot, and then you got a separate plant. So it's simply for propagation purposes, but yeah, this thing is just a big root mess right now. So yeah, just when you see a root, just direct it back into the pot. So once I take it out of the pot, I'll show you what it looks like. Hopefully there's some good examples of it transitioning to a soil root. So let's take it out of the pot and kind of see what we're dealing with. There's roots everywhere. See if there's any roots on the bottom. Oh yeah, yep, there's roots, and there's even some, whoop, that just fell off. So definitely this is going to be a root bound mess. Just gonna do the same thing with this plant. I usually have like a plant butter knife that I'll go around the edges here and kind of loosen up the soil. I don't know if it'll go deep enough, but I'm afraid my little spoon's gonna break. I can definitely feel roots. Like I can barely even place it around the edge here. This thing is gonna be very root bound. I can hear cracking already. I'll go searching for a knife here in a second, but I just wanna try going around the edges, and then what you do is you just push it forward like that. That kind of separates the roots from the side of the pot. So just pushing it forward like that, see if that works. And then you can bang the pot and hopefully that loosens it up. See if it'll pop out. Yep, there we go. Oh, okay. That is root bound for sure. That is one big noodle mess. So I got some entangling roots on the bottom. It is absolutely solid, and I'm just going to rotate it around, see if you can see. Yeah, right here. This root at this point has changed from an anchoring root, and it's developing a soil root. So I'm just going to push that one right back in the pot. So yeah, that's what the soil root transition looks like. This plastic nursery pot is the one that I'm going to be using for this repotting, simply because it's the only pot that I have large enough on hand. And actually, when measuring it, the existing pot, this is an 8-inch pot. This nursery pot, or this plastic one, is 10 inches. So this is actually the appropriate pot, or the appropriate size pot. It's one size larger, which is typically, it goes from 8 to 10 inches. It's a little bit of a wider pot at the base, and it's slightly deeper, but despite its much larger appearance, this is the next appropriate size pot. And when I place the plant in the pot, you can see it has not an excessive amount of gap around the edges, and then it'll have, again, a little bit at the bottom there for a base layer. So this is the next appropriate size pot for this size of plant. And then just like the last one, I'm gonna add a little bit of soil to the bottom here, again, just as a base layer. So for this, I'm just gonna dump it in. something like that. I'm gonna pack it down. It has multiple drain holes kind of along the sides and not in the middle. I'm just gonna dump that in there as well. I'm gonna size it up. I'm gonna pack that down a little bit. And I want it to remain, again, at the same, relatively the same height as before. I'm gonna see if I can push all these existing aerial roots down. And I might actually, just for the sake of this video, I might try and untangle some of these lower roots or entangle the roots at the bottom here. I don't want to cause too much root damage. I'm just going to just lightly pull just so I can kind of grow downwards. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. Just going to use my pencil and I'm going to try and remove some of the soil at least. That way it can loosen up the bottom here. I know some people like to remove all the soil. They like to untangle all the roots. I'm just going to do just a little bit at the bottom here. I don't want this falling off the plank or anything like that, but get rid of some of the old soil. Just kind of loosen it up here a little bit. It's actually pretty packed full of roots in here. So this is one that actually grew up. It went from the bottom of the pot all the way back to the top. So I'm actually going to cut this one off, just where it kind of went back to like an anchoring root. So something like that. I can just hear cracking. Same with this one here. It looks like it's, oh, that one's actually not too bad. This one, where does this go? It wraps right around the back of the plank there. So I'm just gonna follow this one around, and I'm actually gonna cut this one off. Ugh, getting in the way here. So right where it grows back into the soil, right there is where I'm gonna cut it off. Something like that. We'll get rid of these, and then we'll place the plant back in the pot like that. It's at a good depth. And I'm just going to push all those roots off to the side. And again, I'm using the VeryPlants Aeroid Mix. There's a discount code in the description of this video if you want to give this a try as well. And just so you can see like all the roots on top here, I'm just going to fill or cover it with a layer there as well so that it can continue to grow kind of throughout the soil here. So let's fill it in. I'm not going to reuse the old soil. I'm just going to put this in the compost just because it has little pieces of roots and eventually those are going to break down, and I don't want it to cause any rotting issues in this plant here, but some people like to reuse the soil, but for this one I'm not going to. I might end up using this whole bag. I just got like a new order of soil, so I have a couple extra on hand here as well. I'm not going to pack this down like a ton, but I just want it so that the support stake doesn't flop around when I take this to give water and that sort of thing. So I have a garden hose here in my basement. I like to take these over to my bathroom here and spray it down, just making sure that the leaves are clean, and it can help with pest management as well. This might actually be too large for my little plant tray, but at least yeah, it's too large. I'm just gonna place it like this, just so when I dump in the soil, I can at least catch some and then it's not falling on the table. Actually, that worked out. Okay, and I can use my pencil to scoot that stuff back there as well. Okay, so packing that down. I've got a couple more scoops, I think. I'm not going to fill it right to the top, and I don't want to pack it down a ton, just enough that, like I said, it just doesn't flop around when moving it around. So a little bit more on the sides. And then that's it for this repotting video. I'm glad I got this done. It's been something that I've been wanting to do for a while, but I've just been waiting for some more soil to come in. Okay, I'm going to pack it down at the back here, just again for the stability of the plank here, something like that. Okay, here is the finished product. I'm not going to give this one any water for probably about a day or two. I just want to let those roots kind of callus over and heal up. But yeah, this is the finished product. I will definitely be providing some updates down the road, but I think that's going to be pretty much it for this video. If you have any comments or questions, please leave it down below in the comment section. Hope this helps with your monstera plants and knowing when to repot and how to repot. So thanks for watching. Take care, everyone. Bye.